So, Natasha, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Hi, Nick. Thank you very much. Much appreciated, and look forward to having the discussion with you.
Thank you. And before we go into the future, Natasha, can you please tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you
So,
grow?
tell me.
Yeah, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town in Durban, KZN, called Isipingo. So I am a South Coast Durban girl.
And tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So believe it or not, I was 9 years old, and our teachers were going around the class, and they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'm going to be a lawyer. Um, and I am a lawyer, and I've achieved that. And nobody believes me that at the age of 9, I knew what I wanted to be. And I think must have been about 7 years ago. My husband, for the first time, met the same teacher, by the way, by chance. And she said to me, "Did you become a lawyer?" I said, "I did." So that's what I wanted to be, Nick. I wanted to be a lawyer.
So, what attracted you to the world of business? Can you tell
I
us?
always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I didn't want to be a lawyer that went to court.
Right.
I I always wanted to know how to run a business. My father was always very business minded, very commercially minded. Always read the newspapers. So I always wanted to get into the field of understanding how organization works, what makes it tick. And that's really what attracted me. As much as I wanted to be a lawyer, I just didn't want to be in the courts.
Right. Now, today you're the managing director at Adcorp, one of the biggest brands of the country. You've been leading global brands like FedEx. I believe you started your career at PwC, then went to Investec, Hewlett Packard, KPMG, and Novartis. So, looking back over your career, Natasha, would you say there were turning points, or maybe a major turning point?
I think every move that I made was very well thought of. So actually, I started my career off at KPMG, and I started off specializing in taxation, and I moved to PwC in tax, and then I moved to Hewlett Packard, also in tax, right? But what I found was that when you specialize in something, you're very reliant on other departments. So, for example, from the tax side of things, you needed to be, you needed to get legal advice. Then you needed to understand what do the accountants say. So I didn't want to be that person where I needed to rely on someone else to give me advice, and I didn't want to rely on someone or another function that could either lead me down the garden path or not, right?
Right.
And that's why every decision I made was very strategically thought of in terms of becoming a holistic advisor, becoming, well-rounded in everything that I did, so that my reliance on getting advice was diminished. And also, when I speak and when I do things, it's very well thought of, and I've covered all angles. But the turning point in my career was in FedEx, because I joined FedEx to head up legal, and I was the managing director of FedEx from a legal perspective, responsible for sub-Saharan Africa, and then the Africa region. And in 2021, I moved, or 2020, I moved into operations. And that was the turning point in my career for me, because it gave me a completely different perspective to business, because I moved out of legal, and now I actually sat and I saw an operations, when I say an operations, an organization from the top in totality. And I got to be responsible for that. So that was amazing. That was a turning point. And now with Adcorp, I'm also sitting in that role where it's not a legal role, it's actually running a business and being responsible for it.
And tell us, who inspired you? Who inspired you, especially in your early days?
My inspiration to go up the legal path and carving out my journey was, no one famous, but very famous to me.
Yeah.
People in our community would know this person. The world probably doesn't, but who inspired me was my dad.
Right.
He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a professional, but he was the most sound person I know, gave me the best worldly advice. And he really, really believed in advocating for right and wrong and, putting people first. So he was my inspiration.
And what would you say is driving you today? What is motivating you? What is energizing you every day?
Believe it or not, what energizes me every single day are my two children. They keep me on my toes, Nick. Even when you are exhausted, you gotta like recharge your solar panels and get it on. But from a professional perspective, what energizes me is making a difference. I know it sounds very cliche, but if you look at my journey and what or the number of lives that through the organizations we've been able to change, to navigate, to pivot. What gives me energy every day is that we're going out there and we're creating jobs. So Adcorp, especially my division, right? It's about business solutions. It's about putting people in roles that they've never been in before. It's about giving opportunities. We go into a business operations and we bring in tens, if not hundreds of people, and that's putting them back into the economically active world of society. And that's amazing. That's really, hats off. So that's what inspires me, is getting out there, providing solutions and making sure people, even to a small extent, get to be the best version of themselves.
Thank you. Now, as a mentor to many, many future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
I actually have a really, and it makes me very emotional, story is I was working at FedEx and I went to the garage, the BP garage up the road, to do not what people have to do, which is for petrol, right? And that's a grudge purchase of mine. I hate paying for petrol. Anyway, I went to the BP garage to fill petrol, and it must have been about 6 o'clock in the evening because I was on my way home. And as you would never have guessed, but I'm a talker. So I put my window down and I started talking to the petrol attendant. And I said to him, "Oh wow, like, why are you working as a petrol attendant? You speak so well. What's going on?" He says to me, "My dad's late, my mom can't get a job, and I've got 5 siblings. And they need to go to school. And the only job I could get was to work in the service station." So I said, "Okay, here's my phone number, here's my mobile number. Send me a CV." Send me his CV at 11:45 that night. And I messaged him immediately that night and I said to him, "Come and see me for an interview on Monday." We gave him the time and he came through. And I appointed him in a learnership program. He was one of the few successful people that moved from a learnership into permanent employment. And then from there, that was when I was in legal. And then when I took over operations and I was responsible for the business as a whole at FedEx, I had to form it wasn't an internal audit team, but it was a quality assurance team, which is very similar to an internal audit team. And I took 4 people that were about to be retrenched. He was one of them. He now is one of FedEx's most prized possessions. He is an asset to the business, and he sits in one of the most prestigious teams, which is the internal audit quality assurance team at FedEx South Africa. He is my success story. I always say to my children, "You guys are not my legacy. It's when I touch someone's life and it turns around for the better, that's my legacy. So he's my mentee, for my birthday, which was in March, he sent me a message to say, if I never entered his life, he doesn't know what his life would have been. And he doesn't know where his brothers and sisters and his mom would have been. His mom phoned me and was so emotional when I promoted him into this role, because it was just life-changing. He's my success story. And it's really emotional because it's people like this that don't forget you.
Thank you. Now, there's a big lesson for future leaders, right? In that it doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter when, but you need to show up everywhere, anytime.
Yep, exactly that. And I say that to myself every day about going to gym, and I still don't do it. Got to just show up.
Thank you. Now, Natasha, looking back over your own leadership career, are there any role models of leadership who you have encountered and maybe worked with, who you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
So, Nick, I have a very different view on role models, and I have a very different view in terms of, when you say, who would you recommend and who do you think? I'm not going to tell you, go and look at and read a book on Indra Nooyi or Steve Jobs or Barack Obama. I believe every leader needs to be their authentic self. And exactly to what you said, you've got to show up. You don't be someone else, because you're gonna try and emulate something that's not you. And you're going to try and be someone that's not you. And you're going to pick from this person and you're going to pick from that person. And you're going to, that's actually what a role model should look like. I'm going to give you a story, and it's going to be very quick. I had to speak for International Women's Day. And I asked the room, what does success look like to you? And the one lady put up her hand and she says, you are successful. So I said, but tell me why. Why am I successful? Because I wear a fancy suit. I may drive a fancy car. I may live in a fancy house. I may stand up on a platform and speak. Is that success? What do you know about me as a person? Me as a person is what dictates success. Am I a good human being? Do I show up? Do I give back? Do I pay forward? So I'm not I actually can't recommend anyone to be a role model for future leaders. You are a role model for future leaders. You need to be your authentic self for yourself.
Thank you. Now, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
The future of leadership for me is very simple. You got to be agile. You got to be nimble. And you got to be open for change. And my current CEO told me that. And the first time he told me that, you know the concepts, you get it. And then when you start watching it play in action and almost unfold in front of you, you realize what it means. And when I say be agile, be open to change, be pragmatic, it's all about, we're navigating very different times, right? What we did growing up is very different to what we are doing now. With AI, with machine learning, with what's happening in the digital era is completely mind-boggling. So you gotta be open for change. You gotta keep a growth mindset. Dr. Carol S. Dwecker always says, have a growth mindset. And that was one of the best books I've read, because it transformed the way I thought, and it still transforms the way I think. Because I always say, move away from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. The advice I can give, growth mindset. Have a growth mindset, be agile, be nimble, and be completely pragmatic. And then the other thing I really think that's important, which we all forget in today's fast world and with the pressures of being a leader, is be kind to yourself. Just take the time to be kind to yourself, because that's so important. I think we forget that we actually owe ourselves kindness.
Thank you. Now, as a leader of teams, as a leader who's enabling so many future leaders, what is your advice on how should we go about to develop and enable future leaders?
I always say, don't give a person fish, give them the rod. Keep people relevant. But apart from just giving them the rod to fish, you've got to invest time in them. You know, everybody talks about today's generation. Nothing's changed from today's generation to the last generation, right? It's just that we grew up, we think we grew up in tough times, and we are a lot more sturdier than what today's generation is. But when you speak to our parents, they're going to say we were little spring chickens compared to the way they grew up. And I think the difference is that we have to invest time in people, but you got to truly invest. It's not a tick box. You got to genuinely care, and you got to be intentional. And it's really, really important to be intentional in what you do. And one of my previous managers said to me, time is something you're never going to get back in life. So be certain that when you spend your time, you're going to get an ROI on it. And that's why I always say, when I invest in someone, I'm giving you something that I'm never getting back in my life. So if I'm going to do something for you, it has to be intentional. It has to be authentic, and it has to be genuine and sincere. And you got to understand that whoever you are developing may not necessarily want the same things as you. And that's okay. And again, one of my most fundamental things that I drill into my kids and my team and the people around me is, your mind is something that no one can teach you. Technical, I can teach you, but a mindset is the most important thing that will differentiate you from the next person. And I always say, try as much as possible, and you may not get it right every day, and I don't get it right all the time, every time, is to apply the principles of having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset.
Thank you. Now, Natasha, these are challenging times as the world is stumbling from one crisis into the next. What is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? How should they go about tackling the challenges that they will encounter in their career and hopefully overcome?
Everybody goes through challenges. And future leaders need to know they're not alone. And it's okay to ask for help. I think the problem with us is we put so much of pressure on us, and we think it's embarrassing to ask for help. It takes a village to grow a child. Always remember that. So reach out. It's okay to make mistakes, but make your own mistakes, but learn from others as well. It's important to learn. Remember, you have a village out there, and you're not alone. And everybody wants to see the next person succeed. And if they don't, well, shame on them. But really, you should want success for the next person. And the advice I have for future leaders, it's a hand away. It's a call away. Don't do this on your own. And as you grow and as you start leading bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger organizations and people and numbers, it starts getting lonely. But it's only lonely because we make it lonely. So there's a village out there that's waiting to support you.
Thank you. Now, Natasha, if you were to build a curriculum for future leaders, what are one or two key skills you would want to factor in and maybe teach?
The first thing I would say, yeah, the first thing I would say is, which is really difficult because I don't think anyone can teach you this, but it should be on every curriculum of life, is have an open mind. And the second thing I'm going to say is, if you have to look at it on something that can be on a curriculum, don't lead from an ivory tower. Get down into the trenches with your team, because when you go to war, you want an army in front of you that's going to take bullets for you. So get into the trenches, roll up your sleeve, and own your stripes with your team. You know, don't lead from behind a laptop. Don't lead from an ivory tower. Know every single person in your space. You know, Dale Carnegie says, what's the most important thing about a person? Their name, because their name gives them an identity. Know your people. Know what makes them tick, but also know your business. Your business is not rands and cents or dollars and pounds. Your business is, how does it operate? How does it tick? What makes your people tick? Who's in the business? That's what I would say. You know, combine operations with technical, with, I'm going to say academic, but with the data. But most importantly, know your people.
Thank you. Now, where can our listeners follow you, and how should they connect with you?
Well, they can follow me with you, right? But also I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easily accessible. My details are on Google. I'm on the Adcorp website. I'm the most accessible person. My email address is there. My mobile number is there. And, you know, I always say, Luceri, you know, will tell you as well, you know, if you need someone in a village, my details are very accessible to help you.
Thank you. Now, last but not least, what is your advice for the millions of learners out there who are about to finish school this year, enter a career, enter the world of work? What are maybe one or two success principles that they should keep in mind?
Challenge the status quo and challenge the norm. I think a lot of us, and I know, is we've grown up almost indoctrinated thinking we need to be a lawyer, we need to be a doctor, we need to go into IT, we need to be an accountant, stereotypical career paths. The world has changed, and the world is your oyster. Anything can be a career, but be passionate about it, because passion is what's going to drive your success. So think outside the norm. You want to do it, do it. Don't bottle yourself and hold yourself into what the world or what you think the world expects of you. There are so many opportunities. There are so many options today for our youth. We just got to stretch our mind. And again, it's the thought process, right? Because we've been taught that there's certain things that we have to go into. And this, you know, there's prestige attached to being a certain thing, or, you know, going into a certain profession. And my advice to youth is, one, be passionate. Own your passion. Think outside the norm. But the fourth thing is, be sincere. Because I find a lot of our children today and a lot of our youth today do it just for the sake of doing it. Be sincere, be intentional, and be honest with yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership, and for leading us to a better future.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate it. Look forward to future engagements with you.
Thank you.